Hello, and welcome to Moving Forward, Speaking Loudly, Doof Media's dive into Minna Sundberg's Stand Still, Stay Silent webcomic. I'm Elliot Diebold.
And I'm Reuben Morehouse.
So firstly, if you're listening to this via our podcast feed, thank you, but we're actually streaming this episode live on YouTube, and we're referencing pictures and stuff, so you should probably just jump over to the Doof Media YouTube channel and watch the recording of it there. It's going to be way better.
Yes, the link to that will be in the description. This is the pilot for a new show that we're running as part of our pilot season. And thanks to GlassClearly for donating to make this episode possible.
Yeah, if you like the show and you want to see it continue, leave your feedback on this pilot using the form that is also in the show notes down below.
Love them show notes.
So with that said, I suppose we should get into it.
Yes, stand still, stay silent. So how should we tackle this, Elliot? I mean, we've got the slides. Should we just start stepping through and see how we go?
So the prologue, which is what we're covering today, sort of goes through a number of vignettes. So I've pulled out the sort of first panel of each of those, and I'll just quickly talk about it as we get there. So here we're looking at the start of the first part of the prologue, which is setting us up to be in Norway on year 0, day 0, which I thought was...
Which is so ominous straight off the bat.
It's already a very interesting hook. You're like, year 0, what is that? Yeah, and so then obviously, basically what we have is a bunch of people in this little remote village talking about like an illness that is affecting the elderly in particular, and just what they're going to do about it. There's one guy in particular, Askell, who organizes to get his grandmother moved from the city out to this small town to help isolate her.
Yeah. But before we get into that, I love that from this very, very first panel, we're introduced to the color palette that's going to last at least for the rest of the prologue. And it's so interesting of a choice. It's this black and orange panel that's kind of evocative of like fire or something like that. Or like kind of mystical a little bit. It sets the scene so well. It's like dreary, but with this burst of like ominous, mystical orange.
Yeah, I would have described it as incredibly Scandinavian, which, like, I've never been there, so I'm speaking entirely from, like, my knowledge of the romanticized knowledge of those parts of the world, but, it's all very grey and white, which, evokes the sort of, deep snow type stuff. And then you're right, the orange is like, the warm, stale air of like the fire that you have indoors in cold places like that. I guess I'm mostly tapping into my ski trips as a kid when I'm talking about snow. But like, yeah, it's oddly dreary and calming at the same time. Like the way the greys and blacks play off of the oranges is so simple and effective.
And the mountains obviously mostly being black and white with the town completely orange as well kind of adds to that. Almost like the town is the warmth and the black and white is the harsh nature.
Yeah, yeah, totally. There's also a kind of like watercolor. I'm not an artist, so I'm assuming that's the effect that's going on throughout the entire prologue. I just like think that adds to this sort of sense as well, of the kind of, the way we're sort of flitting through time, I guess I'd say, and the the way watercolor to me is just something that runs away when you try to use it. Actual artists probably do better, but yeah.
Anyway, I think the first thing I noticed when I started reading this was the sense of humor in the story, in the comic, right? Almost immediately we get this very strong sense of humor from the author, which is very consistent throughout this prologue, even as kind of horrifying things are happening in this prologue.
Yeah, definitely. There's been a number of moments that have just made me straight up laugh out loud. As we said, we're already only in the prologue that has moved through characters so quickly we barely get to know them. I pulled out this other one. There's a really funny thing that gets done a number of times where we have these square panels. I'm going to use the mouse to introduce characters, and then the text kind of plays off of it. So here there's like a joke about how this husband is always dying from something, and then his first line of dialogue is, "I'm dying, but that's okay."
It is pretty
like
good.
it made me laugh a bunch. And there's a few good jokes based. It's very like Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They do the same jokes with the title cards.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, never like meta aware, but just kind of tongue in cheek,
exactly.
you know? Yeah, it does, and the comic does retain this tone of for the entire prologue, except one part. There's one of these vignettes which I don't think has any jokes and is just kind of grim and depressing.
I think I know the one you mean, and we'll get there.
Yeah, but all the rest of them have this very consistent kind of tongue-in-cheek tone, which I found myself really enjoying.
Same.
I guess we should talk about the elephant in the room here. The fact that this is a comic about an illness, and this probably is the strongest in the prologue and probably falls away if we get into the actual story based on some of the hints that we see. But this webcomic is about an illness that starts transmitting and has, some flu-like symptoms and
a very long incubation period where it's still like infectious. Like it's
transmissible.
It's kind of, like the more it went on, the more I was like, are we sure this wasn't written in the last month and a half? Like this is
it was weird how prescient it was.
It's creepily accurate. In fact, like I actually started thinking, I was trying to remember where all of this stuff was when, like, GlassClearly donated to get us to cover this. I don't think like the current situation was anywhere near as serious, at least in our part of the world, back then. So it's kind of like, it's just like, it's so crazy that even 2 to 3 months ago, reading this prologue was an entirely different experience to what we probably just went through.
Yeah, and I think there was some discussion around this in the Discord, basically boiling down to people found it less enjoyable because it hit a bit too close to home, which I think is a totally fair read. But I actually found it amplified my experience, although there are a few things that didn't land, like the illness here spreads very quickly, and there are things like elderly are strongly encouraged to go to the hospital and stuff like that, which I'm like, oh, be careful. But apart from the things that felt just inaccurate considering the current situation, I actually found it made it a lot more, I don't know, it just made it feel a lot more real in a way that made the prologue land for me really well.
I can see me reading this 6 months ago, just sort of going through the prologue being like, yep, no, the zombie virus.
Yeah, it's a disease cliche. Yeah, totally. A zombie, exactly. I thought it was a zombie virus to start off with, and it's not. But it differentiates itself and makes itself interesting enough to be kind of relatable and unique, and then that kind of latched into my current senses.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think we're going to try and keep those comparisons just to this slide, because otherwise like we could do it for hours, and we don't want to touch on that for the whole episode. So suffice it to say, this prologue is borderline prophetic. And yeah, I mean, should we move on?
Yeah, let's move on.
So we're going to jump into our second little vignette now. And so this is set in day 3 in Denmark. So here we meet like this guy called Michael, and he kind of sneaks out of work for the day to go and do something with his cat, like take it to the vet or something. And he's on a ferry out at sea when all the ports kind of get closed because of the illness. And he gets fired, sort of has a bit of a meltdown, and ends up befriending the staff who he was originally harassing. It's in this sort of wholesome turnaround moment, which I quite liked.
Yeah. My immediate reaction to this, though, was, oh, wait, what happened to our main characters? Because I kind of knew there was a cast of, from the very first image, you see a cast of like 5 or 6 core characters, and I just assumed the people we met at the start of the prologue were them, and I was like, oh wait, we're just jumping to other people now. And then it took me a little while to realize, oh no, wait, these are just vignettes, and we're kind of seeing the virus playing out over a few days, which is an interesting way to do this prologue. I thought it worked quite well.
But you're right, it probably took me till about halfway through the third one to kind of realize that's what was happening. And like, even as I started this second vignette, I was already like, I'm glad we have to read this twice for the episode, because I've already lost track of the characters. And then, of course, I got to the end and was like, I'm glad I didn't waste too much time trying to track the characters.
Yeah, you don't need to, right? The characters are there to give you these small experiences of, 1, what it looks like as the virus is taking off, but 2, what these different areas kind of feel like.
Yeah, and I think we'll touch a bit more into why I still think Minna, the author, took the time to establish all of these characters as well, because like there are specific panels dedicated to giving their names and characterizing them, and I think there's still a point to it. But we'll
yeah, and they are characterized quite strongly. Like, these are characters that it's not just watching plots. The main point of these vignettes is seeing people react, and you get these kind of very human reactions to these situations.
Yeah, I also think it looks like the protagonists are probably going to be the descendants of all these people. That's my theory I've got going on.
Oh, interesting.
One of the people in, let's touch on it when we get to the end, but yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So, this one was yours.
Yes, true. Again, just kind of talking about the tone and the comedy in the story so far. The joke being made here of very funny, yes, I thought so too, is a bit of a recurring beat that appears throughout the comic so far, and it's quite fun. Like, I think possibly my criticism is maybe the author is leaning a bit too heavily in their own voice, which comes across a few different ways. But it's a very enjoyable story so far, even though it's dealing with some horrible subject matter. So give it a pass.
Yes, it's funny. I disagreed for at least this example, just because it's so, in the panel we've pulled, obviously Michael is getting hit by that from this staff of the boat.
Yes.
But he's the one, he said that to his boss like 3 pages back. So I didn't really see it as like the author's voice. I saw it as like the voice of this character.
A bit of an intentional turnaround of the character.
This staff giving him shit for being
fair enough.
Himself. Yeah.
And he is. He really is.
He turns it round at the end there, but he doesn't get off on the right foot, I don't think.
No. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not going to be too harsh on this businessman. He's clearly in a bad situation.
Yeah. So then on this next slide, I sort of pulled this one out, and it's more for the second half. So this is the final page of this vignette, and you can sort of see what we have sort of here is this is where I think her name is Signe.
Yes.
Actually, I should have done this already. Blanket apology for mispronouncing presumably a lot of things.
Yeah.
In today's cast,
there's some real there are some names in here that I'm sure we're going to mispronounce. So sorry about that in advance, folks.
If we go ahead with this, we'll definitely try a lot harder to get better.
We did look up some of these names to try and get the pronunciations of them right, but man, some of them are just not easy to find.
It was still tough. But anyway, so here we have Michael and Signe, and then they're sort of like, oh, it's okay, things are going to work out. And then this next slide is the second half of that panel, and it just there's this whole things will always work out in the end somehow. I suppose you're right, and it's just all black and red.
It's clearly intentionally counteracting what is being said
and this
here.
worked great for me because I was having to sort of scroll, much like how these two slides were separated, to see the whole pages. So I like read that and then scrolled down to just see black and red, and it was just like, oh, okay, or not.
And this disjointed, I suppose you're right, which is clearly like just floating there unclaimed, like it's this lonely statement on these troubled waters.
And something I actually noticed after pulling this slide out to bring it out here is all 5 vignettes, all 5 of the first vignettes actually do this. I think this one's the most pronounced, but the other 4 actually all do it to some extent. It's like all 5 of them end with someone saying, yeah, things are going to get a bit better now. And then it just scrolls down to black and red. And you're like, okay, probably not.
Yeah. Nope. Oh, boy.
Yes. And so now we hit our third vignette, which is set in day 5 in Finland. And this is sort of, we meet this extended family, kind of, a bunch of brothers and sisters and their immediate family, who are kind of getting nervous for the most part about this whole illness thing, and so they're just going to duck out to sea for a few weeks and try to ride it out.
Yes. The brother specifically feels like he's a bit of a doomsday prepper type.
Yes, probably saved his sister's lives in this vignette. I mean, I think like what really carries this vignette is that kind of tension between different members in the family of like how serious they should be taking this. And it's all still at that stage where they can all kind of be lighthearted about it.
Yeah. And it still has that lighthearted tone.
Yeah, exactly.
We should talk about the names of these characters, because as I got to this one and we are introduced to them, their names are Aino, Kaino, and I know. And my immediate reaction was, oh my God, I hope these guys aren't our protagonists because that's going to make this so confusing to talk about.
Yeah, no, it did remind me a bit of like some of the dwarves from Lord of the Rings, who have like all the matching names when they're related.
Yeah, which possibly is intentional because, as we later learn, this is a more medieval world than we suspect.
Yeah.
At least the virus seems to turn it more medieval than we suspect.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, no, I'm glad you pulled this out. This is definitely the point where I was just struggling to keep up with all the characters we were meeting. Like, well, just their names. It was like I already, I knew who Aino was and who Kaino was, and I could tell you stuff about them. Couldn't tell you their names. Which I suppose
Well, the
makes
fact
them
that they
realistic.
were so yeah, the fact that they were so close together for me was kind of like, okay, you're allowed to not know their names. Like, it kind of felt like it's the author explicitly giving you permission to be like, look, I know their names are similar. You don't have to worry about it. Don't worry about it. And I was like, all right, cool. Don't worry about it.
Yes. And so then our next vignette is year 0. We're over on day 9, and we're finally in Sweden. Here we meet the Vasterstrom family. Again, apologies. They're sort of traveling out to this cabin that they have, I guess, somewhere remote to ride out the rest of the illness. And like, this is definitely a bit of a turning point vignette, in my opinion. Like, you can already see how much grayer and bluer the panel is, those of you who are watching this.
Yeah.
And there's nothing explicitly saying that we're post-apocalyptic in this like vignette, but it definitely felt like we were there. Like, it's a bit of a cliche, the like single car driving on the road. They don't see any other cars. They stop at a gas station and basically loot it. This already to me started to feel like after the society started to fall apart.
Society is definitely fallen apart. The gas station thing to me seems like it's explicitly a kind of thing, the kind of thing that would be used to indicate, okay, things going bad, Actually, there was something else in the next panel that I found really interesting, which was it makes reference. So we kind of find out that the patient zeros of this thing were these 11 mysterious refugees that appeared. And I don't think a reference is made to them in each of the vignettes, but at least in about half of them, I would say, we get kind of updates on the patients. And as the vignettes progress, the patients are doing worse and worse. And it's almost like a clock of like the number of patients that are infected counts up. And we find out, oh, actually, it doesn't seem like there's a cure. And it seems like, it seems like it's more and more lethal. We find out here that 7 of the 11 patients have died. And as this is unfolding, people are saying, oh, it doesn't seem like it's that lethal, like it doesn't seem that bad. But as we find out that more and more of the 11 patients have died, it becomes clear there's not really much you can do about it. Like, this illness is worse and worse as time goes on.
Yeah, like in the first vignette, it was just kind of like, there's this weird new illness. They think it maybe affects old people slightly worse. And then in the second one, it was kind of like, oh, everyone's overreacting a bit, like it's spreading, but all of the 11 people who, and they're refugees that no one knows where they came from, which is a fun mystery.
Yes.
But it's like, oh, they're all sick, but none of them are like bad. And then
it's not that bad.
It's like
exactly.
1 or 2 of them have died in the third one. And now here, we're seeing that like 7 of the 11 of them are dead. And it's a great through line to help connect, because we touch base with it every time it's getting that much worse. It's a really simple way for us to follow like the ramping up of the seriousness of the illness from society's perspective. Like, it's a very simple way, rather than sort of telling us abstractly, everyone's a lot more worried now, or pulling out crazy death counts. It's just kind of like a very simple, small example we can touch base with to show us that it's getting more serious.
And more serious it does get.
So at the end of this sort of small vignette where this family in the car sort of just has a little tiff. The dog pees in the car, but they'll kind of get.
I think the representation, what we're seeing in this is tensions are mounting. Is basically the subtitle of this vignette, I would say.
Yeah, I could see that. And then we get to at the end of it, there's this is where we start to accelerate the amount of time we're going through. And I really brought this one in. So I wanted to talk about these 2 pages, but when I actually put them side by side, like this next to each other, I noticed they fit together perfectly, and it's actually designed to be 2 pages of a comic book, and I hadn't realized, because it was a webcomic, I hadn't noticed, and like I never would have noticed this if I hadn't tried to put the two of them together by fluke.
I didn't notice it until much later that there were things like this in there.
Like, this is so cool, and because there are hard copies available, aren't there?
Yes, actually, as soon as I finished making my notes on this prologue, I went out and bought 2 of the hard copy collections, which maybe indicates how much I was enjoying this.
Yeah, definitely. Also, Vegeta SS4 in the comments just made a good point. Like the whole Year Zero thing is just inherently ominous for a modern setting.
Yeah, the fact that it's now, but now is Year Zero means when the fuck are we going to be?
What is switched? What is happening now? Yeah. But anyway, so I just thought this was really cool because I never would have noticed that the webcomic was setting itself up to do cool, I don't know, print comic stuff like this. But yeah, I also just want to talk about these 2 pages, and I can see why this is, like, I think the first thing where it's just one big 2-page spread, because this isn't a very important thing. We're going from these vignettes that were all 2 days apart to, like, I think here we skip like a couple of months.
Yeah, the next one is on like day 60 or 70, isn't it? Oh no, day 90, month 3.
And it's a really cool way to sort of do that, and I like the way it's like a bunch of different images that are like, various mixtures of like heartwarming and also just kind of tense. Like the people putting up the fence like that's an ominous image, but then you also have like all the people sleeping together in a bed, which looks like very cozy. So like it's just it's these mixed signals of like, people are coming together, but also things are bad.
Yeah, can I talk about something I only noticed about 5 minutes ago, which is I don't know what it is, but there's something up with cats.
I was just about to say, all 5 of these images have cats in them, don't they?
Yes, and there are so many cats in these vignettes. They're talking about the cat that the grandmother has, and they're talking about the cat that the guy who was on the ferry has, and there's cats coming up later as well. Like, cats seem to be a very strong recurring motif in these vignettes, and I don't know exactly what it means, but I'm pretty sure cats are going to play some important role somewhere. I don't know exactly what, but the fact that there are so many cats just can't be a coincidence.
I mean, it's a thing on the internet, like, just statistically speaking.
Yes,
there's an 80% chance Min is a cat person as someone on the internet.
No, it's true. And there are like 3 or 4 dogs in the 90 panels we talked about. There's 2 on this page, and the family in the SUV in the previous vignette had a dog as well.
There's 5 on this page, I can see.
1, 2. Are you getting cats and dogs mixed up?
Brown cat on day 13.
No, the dogs. I'm talking about the dogs.
I misheard you.
Yeah. There's like a lot of dogs as well. And so that kind of makes me think maybe I don't have a leg to stand on with my cat theory. But I really do think...
Double down. Go ahead.
I really do think something's up with cats.
I guess we'll see.
We'll see, yeah.
Yeah. So now we enter sort of our last of the regular vignettes. Although even this one,
this is our penultimate vignette.
It's a bit different from some of the others. So this is after month 3, and we're now jumping over to the Icelandic Coast Guard, who are defending their coasts a bit more aggressively than they used to.
Yeah, this is pretty intense, right? This is the one I was talking about that isn't like lighthearted like all the others kind of are, because the plot of this is basically the Icelandic Coast Guard sees a family approaching them and just blows them up, sees a family like friendly waving to them and just fucking shoots them.
Actually I've pulled out that panel as well.
It's pretty grim
because so basically I mean, you can see here, like, they're all rosy-cheeked and everything as well. Like,
they're clearly, like, a wholesome, happy family.
You've got, like, an old balding guy out the back to sort of show that, like, this isn't, like, a military force or anything.
Yeah, maybe this will be contextualized later, and these guys are, like, changelings or something. But I got to say, so far, pretty grim.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like Iceland's taking a hard stance, which... I mean, like, is crazy, but this is 3 months in. We don't know how bad things are.
Yeah, and it clearly works for them based on what
Yeah,
we find out
exactly.
later.
So it's going to be really interesting to see. As we're sort of reaching the end of these main vignettes, there's something I wanted to talk about. But like, we've hit all 5 of the countries that are left in the known world at the end of the
Yeah,
prologue, and I wonder if
yeah.
we're sort of establishing some of those cultural beats that page 67 starts to talk about. Maybe we should just wait till we get there, because I pulled that one out as well, actually.
Yeah, but to talk about this one a little bit, it could be like, oh, maybe this is a reason that the Finnish hate the Icelandic because they blew up a refugee ship or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of things that after 90 years could turn into
Yes.
reasons for like myths.
Because this vignette does center around a young man whose name I've forgotten, who basically isn't really okay with any of this and enters a quarantine to be let off duty after helping to blow up this ship. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see like learn more about the cultures of these 5 nations, and then also as well, I'm assuming our protagonists are going to be a team with at least one member from each of those 5, and how the characters all like fit into those cultures and everything.
Possibly. We'll talk about that later, but Peter Pye just made a great point when they said the rosy cheeks could be the rash illness, which does make this a bit more reasonable. I don't know if I believe that, because rashes are not equal to rosy cheeks, but it could be right. It could be right.
It's a fair comment. I don't know if I agree, but like, it's possible.
Yeah.
Well, because I guess we don't know what the other symptoms of the rash illness can be. Maybe it turns you into a really nice wavy person.
It could. What a horrifying illness. Yeah, you have a 90% chance of turning nice and a 10% chance of turning into a troll.
Yeah.
So we get, at the end of this vignette, we get this interesting transition as we scroll down the page. The colors transition from these dark, blacks and oranges into these kind of light blues and whites. We get this broken up image that kind of shows us like fragmenting and time passing in a really nice visual way. A lot of I guess we should talk about a lot of the panels in Stand Still, Stay Silent are fairly straightforward structured. There's nothing too revolutionary being done with the webcomic structure, but there are some panels like this that are just laid out so nicely, and the way the kind of images lead into the flowing clouds that looks really beautiful. Like, yeah, it's a really nice looking panel that just symbolizes the transition from the old world to the new world in so many cool ways.
Yeah, even before like I sort of sat down to study this particular panel and why it affected me so much. It's just one, I'm sure everyone who reads this prologue, this page jumps out to them and will be one of the ones they remember, because it visually just stands out so brilliantly. And as you said, like, I love the point you made about how like the divisions are sort of signaling the way we're sort of leaping forward, and the distance or the break between the now and the then, or now and the future, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah, and we end on the word again, as in, like, is all well again now in 90 years in the future? Something I didn't notice when I first read this panel is if you look, the clouds are actually filling in the picture as well. Like it's really just well composed, and people probably wouldn't notice that their first time through, but you just see all these like things that are showing like, there's a lot of interesting thought put into the arrangement of these panels.
And then to follow up on a point we made earlier, this is the first vignette that doesn't end with like a big fade to black. This is our fade to white. Which is important because this is probably the first one that doesn't go to a situation that's worse than the last one. This is where things start to take an upturn. Because we immediately jumped...
Well, does it?
Good point. We'll see.
It's interesting. It gives you a bit of a hopeful vibe. And then the next panel immediately breaks that with this, what is obviously like a harsh reality kind of setting in, right?
Yeah, that's true. So, we've got the first part here. Like, we jump ahead to year 90, and before I get into a bit more about like the year 90 vignette, it's interesting because the clouds here very much match the ones from that last panel. And we were just talking about how those clouds do kind of leave you with this sense of hope that things will get better again. And then, so we immediately go, oh, here's year 90, and it has these same nice inviting clouds. But also there's like, this seagull screeching. I'm pretty sure the main one in the bottom part is doing a shit.
Yeah, or it's just like killed something.
Yeah.
Maybe it's angular and gross, whatever
Yeah,
it
that's the
is.
thing. All the seagulls are drawn in very like harsh angles, like to kind of cut
Yeah,
into the sky. So it's sort
yeah,
of like there's this. Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, it's a peaceful place, but it's not perfect. Like this isn't paradise.
yeah. It doesn't completely take away the feeling of hope, but it definitely gives it this. I don't know, like it undercuts it.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, this is probably a better panel to sort of explain our last vignette because so this is actually the
Yeah,
second half of the page we just, the top half of the page we just saw.
yeah.
So what we've got here is like there's a group of adults, and in fact, two of them, their surnames are Wasserstrom, which was the family we saw in was it Denmark? God, see, I'm getting the characters confused despite
Yes.
having read this twice. I'm sorry. But the point is, two of the people here,
It was Sweden.
Sweden.
It was
Okay.
in Sweden.
Anyway, yes. The point is, two of the characters that we see here are, I assume, are direct descendants, or somehow related to the two or two of the characters we saw in a previous vignette. But
Yeah.
basically, so this group, including these two people, have made a pitch to go on an expedition to the Silent World, which we learn a bit
Hmm.
more about in a little, but is basically everywhere that's not Scandinavia.
Yeah.
And their pitch to go and see what's happened to the rest of the world is somehow kind of successful, and
Yeah.
basically due to a bit of luck. But they don't quite get as much money as they wanted, so they resign themselves to having to hire a bunch of weirdos, and that's what they're going to do.
Yeah. And then before we talk about the bunch of widows, I had to pull this panel out because this one genuinely was so funny. That as they're prepping for this meeting to find out whether their grant funding has been successful or not, they realize one of them has a hole in their pants, and so they're like, "Oh, quickly, let's cover it up with ink." And then they get called in as they're like pouring like pen ink on this guy's leg, and the facial expressions of the four characters in this panel, it's just so funny. Like it really just got to me, and it's such a great representation of the comedic style.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah, it's a great point. Just to jump back a panel though quickly, I just briefly wanted to mention I love how we start to set up the new world. Like we have the capital of Iceland is the capital of the known world, so you're already like, okay, shit's
Yes.
gone down. The capital of the
Yeah.
world has a population of 41,000. That's not very
Yep.
high. The immunity rate is like one of the top three statistics you
Yeah,
mentioned.
I love that. It's like, oh,
Because
okay,
that's
like things got
that's like
real.
lower than I would have expected, like as well. So it's like raising questions and answering them all at the same time. It's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So yeah, they start talking about how they didn't get enough money to hire as many people as they needed. They were planning on hiring 8 people, but they only got money to hire 3, and they realized that they can cut it down to 5. So they start talking about who are they going to get, and it took me a surprisingly long time to realize that this is obviously them talking about who are going to be our protagonists. I was about halfway through this conversation, and I was like, oh, this is setting up our protags. And it's such a fun way of framing them as like desperate people who are kind of probably idiots and recently fired. And it's such a great way to, even before we meet our protagonists, set the background for like why they've come together. And what we know about them is that they're willing to work for cheap is basically the one thing we know about our protagonists.
it's
so
at the
far.
bar very low. Like we shouldn't be expecting 5 mega commandos. We're going to be getting 5
Yes.
kind of broken people, presumably, which of course is good storytelling.
Yeah. Should we talk now about the fact that there are actually 6 of them, or should we talk about that later?
I'll jump to the next slide because that's
Yeah. Oh, yeah, true. The next slide has the picture
Yes.
of them. So just quickly before we talk about the stuff in this slide, there are 6 of them here, and they're talking about having 5, which makes me think that they probably pick one up on their journey, as in they set out as 5, and then maybe they find somebody and like they join their party. I don't really know, but that's what I would say. Yeah, exactly. Get one of the natives.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's gonna be. I'm actually super fascinated to find out what's out there. Like the prologue has worked very well on me because I'm now sitting here and I'm like, let's get on this fucking mission so I can see what's out in this world because especially the hints right towards the end.
Yeah.
Where the world's gonna be very different to what we knew of it. I can't wait.
Yes. Before we get to that, I do want to talk a bit more about the fact that this is written as like a published format in mind, right? So you pulled out the previous one that's obviously a 2-pager, and this is also a kind of 2-page spread. We get the top half and the bottom half, and then the next panel, or in the comments for that panel, I think the author Minna like shows us what they would look like put together as like, hey, this is what it'll look like when it's printed. And I found that really interesting. But it makes me wonder whether she feels restricted by the webcomic format. Like,
well, so what's interesting, so if I just jump back to the previous slide, this includes some of what's in the next image. Like, this next image is a bit blurry because unfortunately, like the quick screenshot that was posted in the comments isn't very high res. But there's like overlap in some of these panels. So it's like that's not how it's laid out in the webcomic. Like, it's like Minna has clearly gone away, like rendered it as sort of A4 type pages for the webcomic,
and then cut it in half.
And then she's just posting this to say, yeah, if I can print this, it's going to look like this. So it's cool.
Which is interesting. But the thing that makes me worry is something that I've seen in a lot of other webcomics is they'll do like format breaks that play into the fact that it's a webcomic, like some atmospheric audio or some light animation or something, which is fine. It's a bit gimmicky. It's fine. But it does indicate that this isn't a webcomic. This is a published comic that is being displayed on the web. And it makes me wonder whether, like, we're not going to find things in here that are specifically in here because it's a webcomic. Like, it's not going to play into its format, which is not necessarily a problem, but just something of note, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, obviously something that came up in last week's Sandman episode is I'm pretty new at comics, so I'm probably not going to appreciate that as much because I'm just getting used to normal comics / webcomics.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I don't mind because, like, knowing that there's a print in mind, I mean, as you said, you've ordered the printed copies. I think I'm going to probably do the same, so it's good to know. I don't want to find out that I'm missing out on some of the experience by reading the hard copy, I suppose.
Yeah, fair enough. Definitely fair enough. So should we talk about the fact that the new world is so different?
So I pulled out here the start of a very, very long panel that goes through what are now 5 nations.
Yes. And they're not, I mean, they feel like we're being introduced to D&D style races, right? Like, that's what it feels like.
In fact, so this is actually the second last page of the prologue. And the last 3 all just kind of ditch storytelling. Like, it's like for these last 3, we just hit, okay, this is the last bits of info you need to enter the world for the actual story. So the one before this is like the map of the known world, and then this one is the 5 main cultures, which of course are like Norway, or the Nords, the Danes, the Finns, the Swedes, and the Icelanders. And yeah, it kind of gives you a little brief summary of what each one's like. I noticed a few parallels between what's said about them here and what was set up in the vignettes. Like some of the themes that were, bolded sentences in their descriptions here kind of related to what the vignette covered. So I feel like we're setting up very strong cultures in this year 90 for what these 5 nations have turned into. And again, I'm just really interested to see how that plays off our main cast.
Yeah, interesting. I'm also quite excited to see that.
Because I'm convinced that the team will at least mostly consist of descendants of the people we saw in those vignettes, because I think otherwise...
Who do you think is who?
Oh, what, for the previous one?
Yeah. So if we go back to the previous slide, we can see our party of 6. They don't have many identifying features. I just want to see if you have any like, oh, this person's hair looks like that person's hair. I mean, I didn't pick it, so
I'm not gonna lie. I was already struggling a bit to tell all the characters apart. So yeah, I don't have theories as to who's who, but I think we're going to get at least one person from each nation, and I think it's going to be probably someone related to or descended from the characters in the vignettes. I think that makes sense as to why you'd characterize them so strongly, because in stories you can learn a lot about someone from who their parents and grandparents and stuff are.
Yeah. I don't know if I jump on board with that theory, but I've made my own bold theory, so I'm not one to judge.
Sure.
And of course, speaking of bold theories, if we skip to the
Yes.
next slide, you'll see what's that down in the corner there? Another cat. Called it. They're going to be a part of it. I don't know how, but I'm telling you, cats are going to play a role here.
Yes.
So yeah, we get to this panel.
Actually,
this
so
bit,
it's worth
and
just before you dive into this is worth saying. So in that lore thing on the previous one that we talked about, where it's going over those 5 nations, you described it as a bit D&D, and because like something that starts going, they start talking about like mages and the old gods. And,
yes,
and
exactly.
That's what you start to be like, huh?
Yeah.
And then this slide obviously,
and then this one really breaks the mold, right? Because we find out. Well, we obviously have this horrifying monster in the background of this picture, like shadowy, creepy creature with many, many limbs that kind of looks like trees at first, but is putting a claw on this trunk in front that has, 6 fingers,
I think
think
that's what's fun about this. There's nothing technically here, especially because it's black and white, to tell you that it 100% isn't just trees.
Just some trees,
like the claws are very suspicious, but like, the way the background could all just be trees, or it could be limbs, and like you can't know for sure. And I think it's a great sort of setup for, especially at this stage. It looks like we have magic now, but we're still not sure when we're reading this. So you sort of look at this image and you're like,
yeah,
oh, that's creepy. Like it's very well done.
Yeah. And you get the text: if you come across a beast, a troll, or a giant, do not run or call for help, but stand still and stay silent. It might go away. So obviously we get the name, we get the title drop. So fire off the cannons for that. But also the fact that there's beasts, trolls, and giants, at least, as like mythical creatures. And we're kind of like, man, the world has really changed in 90 years. We get this person in the front who kind of has this like Red Riding Hood aesthetic a bit, with a basket of potatoes or something, and her cat. Or maybe Alice in Wonderland. It's very, it just immediately sets up things are very, very different.
Well, and things are bad when it's like little girls alone in the woods being attacked by monsters, because like what are they doing there? Both the monsters and the little girls.
They've got a cat for protection.
It
I
looks
think,
like it's doing a great job.
For bait, like you throw the cat and the monster eats that, and you run away. I don't know,
theory.
but it's going to be a thing.
It's all coming together. No, like I agree. Like, is it? I guess my current assumption at the moment is we're entering one of those, like, when humans died out, magic came back type stories.
Oh, Elliot, hold on. I think I figured it out. With the cats is what I'm talking about. Sorry. I bet if you have like dander on you, like cat fur, you don't get infected. So cats are like protection from the virus. That's my new theory.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's what's so interesting. I'm so excited because like now, we know that there's fucking beasts, trolls, giants, and all this stuff. So kind of like I'm kind of getting the sense that there's magic in the universe again. But then also there's the virus, and like, there was a reference to the gods. So it's kind of like, is it going to be magic and the virus?
Yeah. Like, did the virus turn people into magic users? Like, how does that work? I'm so excited
to see like both and or one of them and how they work off each other. Yeah,
I mean, I hate that we keep comparing all our pilots to each other, but for some reason, all of the pilots seem to thematically link to each other that we've done. This one reminds me a lot of Empire of the East, in that it's this like old world, new world kind of dichotomy, and we're clearly going to have old world technology versus new world magic as a theme that plays through.
To be fair, I guess people have basically given us their list of things that they think we should cover after Pact, so it makes sense that they all share some factors, because they're all going to somewhat relate to Pact. But yeah, that is actually the last of our slides.
Yeah, that's the end of the prologue. What did you think of Stand Still, Stay Silent, the prologue?
Yeah, I mean, I'm into it. It's so weird. It's kind of weird that this is where we're stopping, because we haven't actually started the story. Like, so
I know, we don't actually know what the story is yet. Like, we know that it's probably got magic in it, and we know that it's going to be these 6 people journeying out to just see what's out there, but we don't really know what it is beyond that.
We're at this sort of weird spot. We don't know who the protagonists are. All we know is that they're going to be going off and exploring.
Is that they'll work for cheap?
Well, we know they're going to be off exploring the silent world. We have no idea what's waiting for them out there. Yeah. Like, it's kind of an odd spot to stop and then maybe pick up again later. Like, because it's like we haven't actually started to cover the genuine story. But
Yes.
I've got to admit, I'm into it so far. I think this is I think we've said this for pretty much all of them at this point, but like if this one doesn't get picked, I'll probably still go finish it in my own time.
We're almost certainly going to cover it in some format, not episode by episode, but fuck, I'm so enjoying this story already. And I'm sad that I can't go ahead and just read it because we might do a longer form show.
Yeah, this will be one of the ones. If it doesn't get picked, I'm going to read it in my spare time, and then we'll have to do some sort of meet up at the end
episode on it or something.
and talk about the completed work. Although I think this is still ongoing, which is insane,
it is. So I saw the most recent chapter came out like. Well, it's in a mid-chapter break. So it finished an arc, I guess, and now it's in a bit of a break, which started like a month ago. So it's not like it's dead. It's just on hiatus.
It's in a bit of a sequel now, right? Because there was like a mission 1, and then I saw like mission 2 started a few years later. So it's like,
Oh, interesting. I didn't see that. So it's kind of like the first story, then the second story.
I think this is all. Like I think what is coming out now is in some ways a sequel, but like kind of a continuation. I don't know, but like that's a lot to cover.
Yep. And it's a live thing, so if it doesn't release that frequently, I mean, it's 3 panels a week, right? I think is the upload schedule.
So what do we cover here?
We covered 90 panels or something here, right?
About 20 weeks.
Yeah. So we just do one of these shows every half year. Easy.
But anyway, so thanks to everyone who joined us. We had a lot of fun reading this. So thanks to
it's a really fun recommendation. So special thanks, GlassClearly.
Yeah, absolutely. We already mentioned there's a form in the notes below this, and if you like this show and you want to see it continue, head in there, give us some feedback, tell us what you liked or didn't like. We've learned a lot. This was our first sort of, similar to the Doof Book Club in some ways, I guess, but our first like live stream with visuals, and I think we've learned a lot doing it. But we want to hear what you thought about how it went as well. Yeah,
totally. If you like this format, you like us talking about this, but want us to change the format, whatever it is, leave your thoughts in the form, and you can decide which show gets picked up for season.
Yes, and if you definitely want to make sure that whichever show we pick and the rest of the Doof Network stays afloat, head over to Doof Media, patreon.com/Doof Media, and see all the great perks you get for being a patron.
Yes, if the best perk is also the cheapest, which is if you donate $1 a month or more, you get access to the Doof Media Discord, which is great, and it's honestly where I spend too much time. There's always so much good conversation happening in there that I actively have to stop myself from engaging in it that much, because otherwise I'll just spend all day talking to our wonderful patrons about all kinds of things.
I'm worried I have to mute the Animal Crossing Discord channel. I'm spending too much time in there.
There's a lot of Animal Crossing chat at the moment.
But yes, as well, if you're just learning about Doof, the biggest show on Doof at the moment is We've Got Ward, and I'm just bringing it up especially now because it's going to be coming to an end very soon. So if you don't listen to We've Got Ward and you don't read Ward, go and get on it, because
great time to catch up.
It's ending soon, and this is the last chance you'll have to follow Ward with Scott and Matt live.
Yeah, definitely go check that out. You can find the links to all that stuff on doofmedia.com. And I guess we'll see you next week for the next pilot.
Yes, which will be on the Dresden Files. So we'll get started on that one. We'll be covering, I think, the first 9 chapters.
Of the first book of the Dresden Files. What's it called again? Stormfront.
Yes. And that one will just be a normal audio one, because we're back to just normal books.
Oh, lame. All right.
So thanks to everyone who joined us live.
I'm going to record myself on video anyway.
And we'll see you all in a week.
Yep. See you next time. Oh, wait, Elliot. We almost forgot to give our traditional sign-off for moving forward speaking loudly, which, as we say every episode, Elliot, is...
Trolls.
Trolls, and we'll see you next week.